Hey everyone, and welcome to All Things Grace podcast. I am thrilled to bring you a very special episode today as we sit down with someone who's not only been a leader of transformative justice in our community, our legal community, but has also played a pivotal role in my own journey as a consultant. Joining me today is Merf Ehman, Executive Director of Columbia Legal Services. I am so excited. I gotta calm down. I'm kind of fanning over here. Okay, so Merf's leadership extends beyond the boundaries of legal and community advocacy. It's also about empowering and trusting others to lead within their own right. So under Merf's guidance, I was given the freedom to kind of explore and grow and gain some insights that, really impact the approach that I use today with all the leaders that I work with. So we're going to go a little bit deeper today, but mostly we're going to find out not mostly, but we're going to find out how Merf balances this grace with accountability, not only as a leader, but as a social change advocate. So let's just dive into this conversation and discover the power of grace in action and ask all the questions that I've been wanting to ask. How you doing, Merf?
I'm doing all right. It's great to be here. It's wonderful to see you, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I know, me too. I feel like, Okay. So first, tons of questions, but I want to first do some background. How long have you been the director of Columbia Legal Services? And can you just tell us kind of like how you got into that role, what that change was like?
Yeah, it'll be 7 years in June, which is hard to believe.
Wow.
It feels like it went by really fast. And how did I get here is a big question. I was a staff attorney doing litigation and policy advocacy, and there was a lot of things happening in the organization that I wanted to change. And I applied for one leadership job in the organization and didn't get it. And then they asked, well, would you like to be the EED or would you like to be the deputy director? And I thought about that and said, okay, I would. I had no experience in either of those positions, but that I would give it a shot.
Yeah. And can I say, having been there at that time, I was like, that was probably one of the best decisions. In my time there, we made a lot of decisions that didn't work out so well. We were figuring our way out. But I can definitely say that was one of the decisions that I think was really good for CLS. And so as a leader of an organization, now I was the equity director at the time. And so we were really kind of just trying to find our way and having affinity groups and conversations and changing things in the organization. As a leader of an organization at that time, or even still, that is focusing on equity and anti-racism, how have you grown as a leader?
I have grown an incredible amount. I realized that as the ED, I have to be the grown-up every day, all the time, and that I can't be immature and I can't act out. I really have to show up with grace. I have to show up with equanimity. And so I had to start a meditation practice. I had to really take a step back and do some self and some soul searching about who I was and what I believed in and how I wanted to show up at work. I couldn't be on my phone in meetings. I couldn't be frustrated or angry. I really had to see the best in everyone and the best in the situations and really think about how to do it in a way that was also honest. So I needed to have both an accurate self-assessment and an accurate assessment of the organization with optimism there. And so I think I've grown leaps and bounds. I'm a much different person than I was. I'm a lot less angry and rebellious and rageful. But I can bring that and understand the anger of staff and the rebelliousness that many people in social change have. And I think that makes me a better leader. I also know that I'm grateful to be here every day, that there's times when I should have been dead and where I made really horrible decisions earlier in my life. And so I think I have, as a leader, I remember that. I remember where I came from. And that really helps me have grace for other people. I'm the stinky homeless kid on the bus that nobody wants to sit next to because they're passed out drunk. And so when I bring that into my leadership, I have a lot of acceptance for other people.
Yeah. Well, I can say one thing that I've always known about you, and now that I'm out here in the world, kind of working with all kinds of leaders with different challenges and different values and motivations and all of that. One thing I can say for sure that I do not see in my path a lot is your level of vulnerability. I remember that, we were having a meeting or there was something that was going on, and you kind of admitted to something that wasn't the best thing. I can't, no need to go into all the detail of it, but basically you're saying, hey, I did this thing and I kind of choked. I didn't know, what to say, but it was the best I knew to say in the moment. And people did not like that reaction and did not like that you said what you said. But I was like, but Merf said it, and I think leaders that I see are just too afraid to say the things and make those mistakes. And so one, I think that has helped you a lot. Having been in different spaces or part of the collective or part of different groups or teams on in the organization where we were like, so much grace because we know that you try. We know that you try. With that said, Merf, I know that's exhausting. I know it's exhausting not to be able to throw a tantrum. I know it's exhausting to keep apologizing or saying, I'm sorry. How do you find, where do you go other than you said you have a meditation practice? Where do you find that sense of, where do you get back grounded again and stand back up after you fall down?
I think where it comes from is a lot of the community groups and people that we work with. We ask them to be vulnerable all the time, to talk about the worst thing that happened to them or the worst thing that they did regularly. And so if we're asking that, then the least I can do is show up and be honest and be vulnerable and model that of what we're asking people to do. And that I'm just really grateful. I think that my life is really good. And there was a time when it wasn't. And I have a 13-year-old who likes to bake and do stuff, and that grounds me a lot. He tells it like it is, your tongue was sharp, or you suck, or, you don't know anything. I don't even know what the word sus means. So how can I possibly have any kind of knowledge of anything at all? Because I am definitely not cool. So I think that keeps me grounded. And I think I sort of jog kind of thing. And I ride on a stationary bike, and I like to take long walks, and my family keeps me incredibly grounded. My mom, who, when I became the ED about a year later, you may know this story, she said things just aren't what they used to be at CLS ever since Aurora left. And so I'm like, all right, Mom, thanks. Really appreciate that. I'll try harder. So just that, and my sister keeps me incredibly grounded. She has seen me at my worst, and we just laugh because, we're both kind of doing the best we can, and we come from a place that's really messy.
Yeah.
And so, and I think just knowing that we all have some trauma somewhere in our lives, and that it's okay, and that it's all right to cry at work. I didn't know that was okay. I thought there was a rule against it. That I had to leave my full self at home. But that integration really helps me, and that I can be real with my colleagues. And for 10 years as a lawyer, I never told anybody about my background or my history because I thought they wouldn't accept me and I'd get kicked out of the club. And then someone asked me to do this NPR story, and I thought, who watches NPR? And I didn't know that was like the highest rated radio station in Seattle. And also that they did reruns. Like, who knew they do reruns on NPR? So not only did I talk about myself once, like people would hear it again and again, especially around Thanksgiving for a couple of years. And that freed me up. So being honest about who I was and where I come from gives me a great deal of freedom because I don't have to hide. So I think that's really grounding. And of course, my partner, because I leave, I think I should get a standing ovation because I rinsed out my cereal bowl. I remember to do it. He keeps me pretty grounded.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I just want to add something. Remember, I was part of the marketing team in the beginning. And your mother was our social media. She gave us all the likes. Your mom commented on every post. I was like, thank you, Mama. Oh, thank you, Mama Ehman. It's so freaking funny because I was just like, we're like, okay, we have like 4 followers and she's like 3 of them. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. But I wanted to kind of pivot for a second to something that's not so awesome, because you were talking about it's okay to cry at work. And I know that recently we lost a beloved staff member. And I just, how did you lead the staff through that? What was that like, trying to make space for people to grieve? But
that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done at work. I got the call from Allison Fredrickson, our HR director, beloved. HR directors are not usually beloved. Allison was an incredibly special person, and I just broke down. I set a meeting, an emergency meeting with all staff on Zoom, and I was just sobbing. And I just showed up how I was. I decided that I didn't have to be anybody else. I just couldn't. I mean, I was just myself. And I told people, and they were upset. And I just sat on the call, whether people needed to be silent or put things in the chat or talk or do what they needed to do. And then we decided to cancel everything that was happening that day. And it was so funny because, not funny, but I woke up that morning and I had like 8 meetings and I thought, gosh, I can't cancel any of them. They're all really important. I wish that I could. And then I ended up canceling all of them. And so it just is like, Allison's life was an example of how you show up and how you have compassion. And that grief is huge. Like, she was killed. She was hit by a tree. She was 39 years old and a wonderful, amazing human being. And so we brought in grief counselors. I reached out to every person in the organization as best I could through Teams and other ways. And we tried to support the family as best we could. And that was really healing for me. And other folks, they wanted to come in and see Allison's office and our offices, because Allison had helped us with the space. So I gave information as best I could. And then we tried to bring food, and we got the space for the family and tried to, because they were from out of town. So we just tried to show up and say, we can do this, 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 and this. And they're like, thank you. And so we didn't ask what they needed. We just said, this is what we could do, and would you like us to do it? And so we said we could put together the handout. I forget what you call that, the little paper that you get. And so we did that, and we put together the PowerPoint presentation and added the music that they sent us. And folks at CLS just stepped up. And we said, you have to apply for the life insurance. We can do everything for you. We just need you to get us this one document. And the life insurance required that we had to send in media about the event. And we're like, you do not have to do that. And I started to look, and I was like, oh God, this is horrible. So someone at work stepped up and said, I can do that. I can compartmentalize, and I can pull all of the media coverage. And the insurance company was actually really great. Once we got everything in, it was like that. But just, that's how we're getting through it. We're continue to talk about it. We try not to pretend that it didn't happen. We formed a committee. I wasn't on it, but asked the staff, what do you want to do? This is what the family wanted, and we did that. But what do you all want? And they came up with 4 or 5 things. And so Allison was an artist. And so we're going to frame one of her paintings, and we're going to put a plaque and dedicate that to Allison. And we're all going to get together in person for a day and celebrate Allison, and maybe have a scholarship or an internship named after Allison. And that's what the staff wants to do. And so we're going to look at all of that. Wow. So that's how we're doing it. Still really painful, and we're still grieving. And we had 2 grief sessions. And I'm reading a book called Healing at Work: 100 Practical Ideas After your workplace is touched by loss. And I found that book. I was looking all over it. And one of the things it talks about is that the word courage comes from the word coeur, which is a French word for heart. And that as your heart is broken, it gets stronger and you develop courage. You feel things more deeply. And that's really powerful. And so we're just trying to say we can show up and be sad.
Yeah. So that is a perfect example of the difference. And for you, I think once, the decision, I don't know if it was decision, but maybe it's more of your evolution, right? But your way of showing up where you center humanity where crying is okay here, hurting is okay here. I recently, I was watching this artist, Regina King, who lost her son to suicide. And she said that her therapist said that grief is tremendous love with nowhere to go, right? Where you just have that deep, deep love for somebody or something and it's gone and you don't know where to put it anymore. And the thing about Allison was it's interesting how many people that are very close to me knew her. And, and I'm like, wait a minute. And so she was so beloved. And my sister's on the board of the other organization that she said, hey, this is some place for you to donate and in my memory. And or it was decided. I don't know if she said it, but it was decided. And I just really, that's a tell. That says something when so many of the people that you love her, So I was like, oh, this is that I was blown away. I was blown away. And to the point where I've had concerns about flying. And I just, it's not my favorite thing to do. And since I stopped drinking, it's really not my favorite thing to do. Like doing it sober is a different thing. But, but after this, I was like, oh, so when it's just your time, I mean, hit by a tree, she was out with other people in front of her, people behind her too. And the tree just hits. I'm like, there was something that was harshly or brutally comforting by the fact that you can't control anything.
You can't. If Allison can get hit by a tree, and there's awful people sometimes walking around in the world, we're sad, but there's just some people who are not getting hit by trees. And if that can happen to someone who's just out for a hike with her running group and with their partner and someone behind, then there's just that was, I think, hard for people at CLS. It was really hard for me to make meaning of that, but it also was freeing, as you're talking about. Like I could walk out the door and anything could happen. Right. Anything could happen. Like it's a big, wide world and universe, and sometimes trees fall. Sometimes trees fall, and we have to pick up. And we also can see how beloved Allison was and creative, and it's a huge loss. So and carry her legacy, because she would not want us to. She would want us to continue her legacy of bringing humanity to HR and bringing restorative justice to conflict and kindness.
Yep, absolutely.
And a little bit of fun.
And some fun. Yeah.
She would always say, Merf, we're closer than you think. We're closer than you think when we'd have disagreements about. And so I think about that a lot. Yeah. We're closer than you think.
Yeah. So speaking of disagreements, when you have disagreements, when you make mistakes, when, Michelle and Merf are just deadlocked and Merf, despite all your efforts and all your meditation that day, you just couldn't get it all the way to level 10 perfection. How do you, and not disclaimer, but to add, there was two people, one of my clients, found out that I was interviewing you. I shared about it, that I was interviewing for my podcast, and they said, could you please ask, when you make those mistakes, what is your process for restoration? How do you put it right?
Yeah, so that's been a place where I think I've really grown. So it's not just about saying I'm sorry, even if it's genuine, and trying not to do it again. What happened to me and where I really hit bottom was right after COVID. And before that, I had been snapping at people, and mostly because I was really afraid, but I didn't really know that. I was just kind of snappish. And I snapped at one of the nicest human beings on the planet, Travis Andrews. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that. And he's like, you just have to stop. You just have to figure it out, because you can't keep doing that. You just have to stop. And I thought, I can't stop. I don't want to do it. And what am I going to do? Like, I don't know what's going on. And so I got deeper into therapy, and I got deeper in, that's when I started my intense meditation practice. even more, and started to really look at what was going on. And what I realized is that when someone was not doing what I thought they should do, when I didn't have control, I thought I was going to die. Like I had this really incredible, strong reaction of defense, of fight. And it was totally out of line with what was happening, and I couldn't stop it. So I had to go really deep back into my childhood and realize that there was a time when I thought I was going to die, when my father, who is a great shooter, got out of 22 and tried to kill me. And I thought I had dealt with that. I've done so much work around it. But what happens is when I feel incredibly stressed, I think it's life or death. And so I react in such a huge way about somebody being late or somebody not finishing a project that I get really afraid. And that's been lifted from me through this kind of work. And I can stop and say, is it a flashback? Am I having a trauma response? And now I get that pause. So now I have that moment of pause to say, okay, I can pause. And so I've been tracking it. I haven't snapped at someone since the end of March 2020. But when I do make a mistake, I, of course, make other mistakes. I try to pause, and then I try to think about where I'm accountable and how I can make repair. So I try to have a practice of repair, and that that conflict is an opportunity. That conflict is grace. That conflict is a way to being closer together. So now when I'm in conflict with someone, I try to see it as an opportunity for them to get to know me better and me to get to know that person better and build that relationship. And in most times we can do that if we're willing to engage in the process and in the type of process of repair. And if I'm willing to just show up and not try to be perfect. Like the job is not to get called out. Like the job is not to look like I'm not being racist or look like I'm not being oppressive. The job is just my work is just to show up fully as me. And if some of those me is problematic, then I get an opportunity to try to do it differently in the world. And the times I've been called out, I can see now are gifts. And if someone cares enough about me to say, hey, that's not good, then thank you, because I can't always see it.
Yeah. So one of the things that, we've there's always been, when people say anti-racism or equity, a lot of times we think along the lines of race, racial oppression. Well, what we're starting to notice is the generational divide now that is really impacting our ability to see each other. So many, and especially in legal aid, when you have attorneys and staff that are beloved, been around 30 years, 40, so long, and in come these not young and old. I got a new terminology today. Earlier in their career, folks that are earlier in their career, and there's a different level of expectation of how fast things move, what kind of grace people should get, what kind of grace they shouldn't get. And so there's been a real clash, I'm noticing, in how these two different worlds collide. Have you noticed that? And what has been your reaction to closing that gap?
Yeah, I think there is some people at CLS are like, no generational difference. Let's not talk about that. And some people really fully embrace it, of course, and some are in the middle, and something people are just people. I think there is something to that. I claim being a Gen Xer and can see the way that I show up in the world has a lot of influence by the AIDS crisis. Like I came of age in the time of lots of people in the gay and queer community were dying. And there was ACT UP, and there was the quilt, and there was just this different sense of who you were and what it meant to be part of a community. And there was just a lot of grief. There was just a lot of sadness, but there was also this incredible joy of coming together. And so I think that different generations have different events like that. There was also the Berlin Wall falling, and there was Band-Aid and apartheid ending. And so all of those have influence on how I show up in the world. Yeah. And so I think it's different for the generation where 9/11, that is what strikes them. And the generation where it was JFK being shot. I think we're different, and technology is different. I remember having this discussion with a millennial, and they kept saying to me, we don't need a book. We need a web, because I wanted to have an administrative procedures manual. And they're like, we don't need a manual. We need something that connects to everything else. And I just could not wrap my head around not having a book. And it took me just a really long time. And they were right. Like, you have this and this and this, and it all connects, and it's easier to find, and things work more that way. But I wanted a manual with a table of contents and an index and page numbers. And so it's like trying to learn. And so I do think it comes up also really around white supremacy, white dominant culture. I think across the generations, like this newer generation, Generation Y or Generation Alpha, it's very different how you show up. And I think particularly with COVID, there's very little separation between home and school, home and work. Like, it's all part of it, because so many people were home during those early college years or late high school years who are now coming into the workforce, and they had got some mental health care at some point, or were told that that was important. And so there's this lack of shame about talking about therapy, or lack of shame about struggling with depression or anxiety. So that really inspires me. There's all talk about gender and about race, and I think it's really incredible that we, the older or the more experienced, I don't know, the later in our careers people, can really learn. And I think keeping an open mind is really helpful. And I also really appreciate it when folks who are just coming in really can see learning from folks who have been around for a while. So that's kind of what I think about it.
Yeah. So I asked everyone this question, so of course I got to ask you. Scale from 1 to 10. 1 is, this life, I need a do-over. Forget it. It's the worst. I just want to scratch this one and start all over.
Wow.
Or 10, I can't imagine a more amazing life. A more, just amazing, blissful, or whatever word that describes just this unimaginable, like, who, me? I got this life. Where would you rate yourself? And if it's not a 10, do you know, and are you willing to share what would make it a 10?
I would say it's probably an 8. I have an incredible, amazing life, but I think I wish that I could have made the world better, and I wish that I've tried to repair some of the mistakes that I made, but I did and have harmed people, and that, I think, makes it an 8. I have tried to be accountable in my life, but there's some things that I've done that people will probably never be whole, and being honest and holding that. And I think that's in some ways my way of making it better, is to continue to hold that. And I've healed from it, but it's still there, and it makes me who I am as a person. And so I think it's really important to not say, oh, I'm done with that, the door is closed. It's like, that's a part of who I am, and I will always carry that with me. And I do that in honor of you, person who I have harmed. And so I like that. And I mean, for crying out loud, I'm on the 12th floor. I have an office. I'm not passed out drunk in a snowbank. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And my mother, when I graduated from high school, said, just don't end up in jail.
The bar was pretty high.
The bar was pretty high. And like, even if we'd figure it out. And when I was a kid, I asked if I murdered someone, and she always brings this up, would she still love me? And she said yes. And there were lots of trauma and problems in our family, but I think I'm so grateful that on some fundamental level, I felt loved. And there were adults in my life who cared for me, who took me in when we didn't have heat or hot water, let me take showers at their house, or Mrs. Sharp fed me dinner and cookies after school. And just that web of care that I think saved my life, because there was some kernel where I knew that I could be in the world. And I got to go to Disney with my sister in November, and I got to travel the world with my family. And gosh, I worked on a merchant marine ship and got to travel the world. I've never flown in a plane. I know I've made some horrible choices in my life, and now I have this incredible life. And it's been incredible. It's been so hard the last 6 weeks with Allison's death, and with other things happening in the world and at CLS. And yet I can hold that. Travis taught me that, both and. I
Mm-hmm.
can hold this incredible, deep sadness and grief, and I can also hold this incredible joy. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could hold both.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm really why it's an 8.
Okay. Okay. So going back to the other questions that were posed by other leaders, and I think you've kind of spoke to this, but I would really ask for you to answer this, knowing this particular leader. So, what do you do when you just feel like you're not enough? Like you see people in conflict at a meeting, and it's that it's your job to stop to speak to address it in real time or whatever it is, and you just don't feel like you're enough. You're not enough to lead the organization, to stop this argument, to take the organization to the next level. That not enoughness. What would you say to someone who just doesn't feel that?
Yeah, what do I do when I feel, that not enough, like I can't do it? I try to pause like in the moment and say, I know we need to address this. I know we need to do it, but I need a minute.
Mhm.
I need a minute. And I try to make a list of the places where I have had some success in
Mhm.
my life. And I think I go back to early in my career when I felt like I wasn't enough. And my client said to me, "You have a law degree."
I guess
Are
it
you an
is
idiot?
contextual.
Like
It
they
is
were like,
contextual.
"Are you an idiot?" Because I was feeling, I'm like, I'm not sure we're gonna win. It's just like you got to get some confidence. You have a law degree,
That's what your
and
client is telling
like what? So I think a lot of that inadequacy stuff is some kind of BS. Like
you.
it's not mine. It's someone. It's the world's. Like
Yeah.
it's someone else's mirror. It's someone else's scale. It's someone else's judgment.
Mhm.
And what accurate, again with the accurate self-assessment, but who really am I in? I made it through. I went through law school. I have tried to improve my life. I have some experience and I have some ideas about things. And that even if I'm not enough, I'm all they've got right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what I've learned. And that because I have made some pretty mis- big mistakes in my life, what's the worst that could happen at work?
Yeah.
Like it's work. It's not life or death. I'm
Mm.
not a doctor in the emergency room trying to save someone's life.
Mm.
Um, and we just do the best we can. Like when Allison died, I didn't know how to handle that situation. There is
Yeah.
no handbook that says when your HR director is killed being hit by a tree suddenly, dead at 39, this is what you do. Or that same day is the first day without your litigation director who's been at the organization for 26 years, who's starting to be a judge that day. Who do you call? What do you do? There's not a handbook. And so I think in that moments of inadequacy, I really have to step back and figure out what's not true and
Mm.
what really is true. Because a lot of those messages, that's someone else's trauma.
Yeah.
That's someone else's judgment. And then who am I, you know? And the other thing is we're not alone. Like that's the isolation of capitalism, and individualism says that I suck and everybody knows it and no one can help me and I'm in it alone. And
Yeah.
that's BS. Like that is such BS because if I can just say, "Hey, I don't know what to do. Do you have some ideas?" That's how we kind of get through things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. There's two more questions. Here's the next one. Um, the world is really scary. November 2024 is really scary. Um, how do you want to be community informed and community led organization where the community is driving the work that you're doing and but people are afraid. Everyone's afraid. Staff are afraid. Communities are afraid. How are you calming people
Mm.
that are becoming more anxious or agitated, if they are? But how are you going about that as things get more heightened as we move forward in our country?
I think it's continuing to build connections with people And at work, just really basic, I'm going out, we have 5 offices, and so I have an opportunity, everybody can have a meeting with me if they want to. With the ED, it's not required, because not everybody wants to meet with me, of course. But then having lunch and taking those steps to build those relationships, because again, we have to get through it together, and reminding us that we're not in this alone, that we do have power, that could be really difficult, and we got through it before, and we can get through it again. And we've gotten through really hard things together. And that we don't need to give our power away to people that are hateful. Like being afraid of hate gives that hate a lot of power. And something I've learned in my life, like when I've tried to go into a restroom and gotten kicked out, or people refer to me as it, like that's them. Like that's not a reflection at all of who I am. So no matter how hateful it gets, no matter how much people want to round up people like me, people who are undocumented, people without citizenship, all kinds of folks, Black folks, brown folks, that we have to come together. We have to be powerful together, because it is scary. And yet at the same time, it's not. There has always been hate. We have survived slavery, and some people did not. Like there have been horrific horrors that we can't even imagine, and we can't even imagine so much that we pretend they never happened. And so we have to show up. We have to witness it. I believe that I just show up as best we can and not give in to hate. Like I have a meditation practice where I do loving kindness, and I do loving kindness for Donald Trump every morning. And that for me is an exercise in humility and an exercise in love. Like, how can I come at it with love? And it's challenging. And yet I try to do it to help myself not be hateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there something that you can name? This is the last question. With all that you said, and you have these great practices, and you may have answered it already, but what are you afraid of?
Well, I used to be really afraid of driving CLS into the ground and it no longer existing, and it would be all my fault. That's a big fear that I have. That I also get afraid of being a bad parent, of not being enough as a parent for my child. I get afraid that I'm overly optimistic sometimes, but I'd rather be. There was some book about being on the side of hope, and I think that that's important. So I think that fear is a teacher, and always sometimes I don't need to have it. That figuring out what is sort of a healthy fear to make change, like fear of dying. I get a little afraid of that. I'm not sure what happens next, and so I think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
I think those are the, but I don't fear for the world, because I believe overall in the long, big universe that there has been progress, that people have been kinder, that we are moving forward. If you look at sort of the huge arc of the world, and I just see that people are less hateful to me than they were 10 years ago on a really individual level. And I think the other thing I'm afraid of is the backlash that when there was so much progress made for folks in 2020, especially on racial justice, that there's pushback. All of a sudden, there's been a crime wave. And so I get afraid of people's fear. I get afraid of how much power fear has to shape people. And so I guess as I'm talking through it, my biggest fear is people's fear. And so as people get afraid, they make bad decisions or mean decisions or decisions not based in love or courage. And so I think that's what I'm most afraid of, is how fear will impact our world.
Wow. Thank you so much, Merf. Thank you so much. But I want to thank you for just showing up. You know, I remember we were at I did the retreat with y'all some months back, and we're trying to get you to talk into the mic, and it was kind of like pushing it closer to your face, and you're having a reaction of the mic being so close to your face. You're like, I'm having a traumatic response. And what you said was, okay, I'm having a traumatic response. And it was like, oh, okay. I mean, it takes something to be that person, but I don't think that you even realize how huge that was to say something that was so vulnerable. But if we could get to know we're all flawed and we're all redeemable. And I think we're really quick to throw each other away, or we're quick to take a thing and make it the thing. And I really appreciate that your vulnerability allows people to go, whoa, I know that trauma, or I know a version of that trauma in myself. I'm okay. Because I remember saying in my mind, feeling, I'm safe, you're safe, we're safe, we're safe. I just, for whatever reason, I felt the need to say it because I felt that immediate reaction of not feeling safe. And I've felt that way before, and not just in an airplane, but I did a training at one time, and I said something, and it was a room of 40 people, and nobody had a real visceral reaction except a Black man, and he was like really activated. And I just don't believe you said that as a Black woman. Why would you say? And I felt like I'm not safe. I felt it. And, it's hard when you are the one that's in the spotlight or seated in the position of power to feel that sense of unsafety and not react out of that fear and out of that defense and it's not defense like, oh, you're making me mad, I'm gonna make you mad. It's a visceral in your body fight, and you want to go there like in these extreme ways. And so if we could have more people that say, whoa, I'm having a traumatic response right now. Can you imagine? Game changer. So even, and were you going to say something, Merf?
No, I was just like, yeah, of course. If we could say that, or I'm having a flight response, I just gotta go, or something.
Yeah.
Like hey, time. If we could just do this sometimes, like time out.
Yes.
Or my son, when he was 3, he'd say, Murphy, I need space, and he'd push his hand out. Just say, I need space. And it's so hard for us to ask for what we need in the moment when those huge feelings are coming up. They may or may not have anything to do with what's happening exactly in the moment. Like when you said that with the microphone, I totally remember, because it's a microphone and it has a certain shape. And when that kept coming closer to my mouth, I was like, what is going on? I was like, oh yeah, all right. I just need having a response here. And I realized that I couldn't do it. Yeah.
And it just became real, and it was human, and it was a moment, and it was, And if we could bring that to conflict.
Yeah.
With that said, perfect segue. With that said, so this is my latest, because you are such a restorative conflict person. I just finally released this. It's a really small one, small book, but dedicated to Merf Ehman and Michelle Storms. This is going to be, and it's all based on everything we've been talking about today. I will definitely send you a copy. I was hoping I could have got it to you before, but I wanted you to know that the impact that you have on people, when I hear you say stuff like, okay, those moments of, am I enough? And I'm like, yeah. People just don't go around saying, I know all these amazing people, but when I think about someone who is about, and the book is called Conflict at Work, Grace Your Way to Resolution. And that is how you do it. That is hands down, without question. When I think of someone who knows how to grace their way to resolution, it's you, and it's Michelle Storms. So I want to thank you just for being that person in my life and giving me space. And, as a Black woman, we have so much stuff around what does, being able to connect we live in a society where there's an agreement about possibility of who can be connected, how that connection works, and what can you really contribute to me, Merf? What can I really contribute? We have way different lived experiences. We have but bringing it back to that place of that humanity and that we are all flawed and that we are all redeemable. That's where that lives. That's that space of grace. And so just thank you for just operating and trying to sometimes snatch your grace, even when it's seeming to run away from you and like, not today, Merf, I'm out of here. And you're like, please come back, Grace. Yeah, I just want to thank you for being that person for me. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks for having me even to be put in the same sort of space as Michelle Storms. It's pretty incredible for me. Yeah. She's always been someone that I have admired and learned from, and her grace is humongous. It holds so many people and has helped me when I've had really difficult challenges. And she's had grace when I've made mistakes. And so I have huge appreciation. And how much I have learned from you as well, and your bravery and courage and going out on your own and doing your thing. And I know what that took to be able to leave the nest and move into yourself. It's inspiring.
Thank you. You have folks leaving there, going off and podcasting and writing books and becoming judges. That's not, I mean, come on, you got it. It's kind of the environment for people going and doing those things.
We want people to leave in some ways and support their dreams. Like, who are we to stand in the way and try to help foster people to do that? Like, if you don't want to be here, and not in a bad way, but if you have a dream. That's what I said to Janet Chung when she said she's leaving. And I jumped up and down and did a happy dance. I was so sad because she's an amazing person, but also she's launched.
Yep. She's a judge. That's awesome.
You're launched. Other people, I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
People do that. Well, I've loved watching your journey, and I might have a tiny piece.
Yes. Thank you. I was hoping you'd say that. Thank you so much, Merf. You are amazing. Thank you so much. And just keep doing what you're doing, because it is working. It's working. Thank you. Have a good rest of your week. And thank you for blessing me today.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please click the small bell and become a subscriber and join me in spreading the message of grace.